In 1952, a plastic potato changed everything. Before Mr. Potato Head hit store shelves, the toy industry was small-scale and fragmented, dominated by handmade trinkets, expensive imports, or things kids cobbled together from scraps. But that little plastic spud launched a revolution that would create a $22 billion empire and fundamentally alter how children play. What we think of as the toy industry, mass-produced, heavily marketed, constantly innovating, is shockingly recent. For most of human history, toys were rare luxuries or homemade afterthoughts. Children played with corn husk dolls, wooden hoops, and whatever they could fashion from nature. The idea that toys deserved their own factories, their own television commercials, their own billion-dollar corporations, that's a post-World War II invention. But here's what's fascinating. The transformation of toys from cottage craft to corporate juggernaut reveals something profound about how we reimagined childhood itself. When toys became an industry, childhood became a market, and that shift from play as natural behavior to play as consumer experience happened faster and more dramatically than almost any other change in how humans raise their young. Today, we're going to trace that transformation. How did toys break free from the world of handmade crafts? Why did it take a world war to create the modern toy industry? And what does the rise of plastic playthings tell us about the society that embraced them? Let's start with what toys actually were before they became an industry. In medieval and early modern Europe, many playthings weren't exclusively for children. Hoops, tops, balls, these were often shared entertainment across age groups. Adults might roll hoops during festivals or play with wooden tops in taverns alongside children. The strict separation between adult and child entertainment that we take for granted, much less defined back then. The shift toward child-specific toys began in the 17th and 18th centuries, and it started with miniatures. Wealthy adults commissioned elaborate dollhouses, initially not for children, but as status symbols. These weren't toys, they were architectural marvels in miniature, complete with working fireplaces and hand-painted wallpaper. Rich women displayed them in drawing rooms to showcase their taste and wealth. Only gradually did these domestic miniatures filter down to become children's playthings. A similar pattern emerged with toy soldiers. Initially, miniature armies were often adult collectibles, detailed representations of contemporary military units that men used for strategic planning and showing off their knowledge of warfare. Over time, these became children's toys, serving a specific educational purpose, preparing boys for their future military service. But here's the crucial point. Before the Industrial Revolution, virtually all toys were one-offs. A local carpenter might carve a few wooden horses, a grandmother might stitch a rag doll, but there was no such thing as mass production, no standardized designs, no toy companies. If you wanted a toy, someone had to make it by hand, specifically for you. This scarcity meant toys carried enormous cultural weight. Take the Noah's Ark sets that became popular in the 17th century. These weren't just playthings, they were religious instruction tools, teaching children Bible stories while they played. Every animal pair was hand-carved, every detail deliberate. The toy was meant to last a lifetime, passed down through generations. The economics were brutal. Toys were expensive because labor was expensive. A skilled craftsman might spend weeks carving a single rocking horse. That horse would cost more than most families earned in a month. So toys remained luxuries for the wealthy, while poor children made do with whatever they could scrounge. Animal bones for dice, scraps of cloth for dolls, sticks and stones for everything else. But the 18th century brought the first cracks in this system. The emergence of a middle class, families with disposable income but not aristocratic wealth, created demand for affordable toys. Entrepreneurs began to see opportunity. In London, a scattering of toy shops opened, though they were virtually unknown outside the capital. Most still sold expensive imports from Germany and France, but some began commissioning local craftsmen to produce simpler, cheaper alternatives. The educational emphasis of the 18th and early 19th centuries also reshaped toy design. Toys were increasingly designed to prepare children for adult life in explicit ways. Rocking horses taught balance for future horseback riding. Dolls prepared girls for motherhood. Toy soldiers trained boys for military service. From the very beginning of commercial toy production, toys were remarkably gendered, deliberately so. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and everything changed. but not in the way you might expect. Early American toy manufacturers emerged in the 1830s, producing doll furniture, toy tools, and toy boats. But this wasn't mass production as we know it. It was still essentially craft production, just organized in a workshop rather than scattered across individual homes. The real transformation wouldn't come for another century. What the Industrial Revolution did provide was better transportation and communication. Toys could now travel farther, reaching customers across entire continents rather than just local markets. This created the first toy brands, companies whose names became synonymous with specific types of play. Milton Bradley started in 1860, initially as a lithography business, but when financial troubles hit, Bradley invented the checkered game of life. Parker Brothers followed in 1883, eventually publishing Monopoly, Sorry, and Risk. But even these early toy companies were small operations. Most toys were still made by hand, still expensive, still relatively rare. The Civil War actually slowed toy production, though it did create demand for toy guns and portable games that soldiers could carry in their packs. The real breakthrough came around 1900 in what toy historians call the golden age of toys. This is when we first see walking and talking dolls, toy pianos, friction-powered vehicles, and steam-powered toys. But notice what powered this golden age. It wasn't plastic or electronics, it was mechanical engineering. Clockwork mechanisms, originally developed for timepieces, were adapted to create moving toys. Water and steam power, scaled down from industrial applications, brought toys to life. Yet even during this golden age, toy production remained artisanal. Each mechanical toy required skilled assembly. Each doll's face was hand-painted. The industry was growing, but it wasn't yet industrialized in the modern sense. Then came World War II, and everything stopped. Toy factories converted to military production. Milton Bradley manufactured airplane landing gear and machine gun parts. Lionel trains switched to telegraph keys and compasses. The Toy Manufacturers of America, established in 1916, spent the war years lobbying to keep their industry alive, arguing that toys were essential for maintaining civilian morale. But here's the twist. The war didn't destroy the toy industry, it revolutionized it. Military contracts forced toy manufacturers to master mass production techniques they'd never needed before. They learned to work with new materials, to streamline assembly processes, to think in terms of thousands rather than dozens. When the war ended, they had the infrastructure and expertise to transform toy production forever. The real game changer was plastic. During the war, chemists had developed new synthetic materials for military applications, lightweight, durable, moldable plastics that could be shaped into complex forms and mass-produced at incredible speed. When toy manufacturers got their hands on these materials in the late 1940s, they realized they were holding the future. Mr. Potato Head, launched in 1952, was the first toy advertised on television. But more importantly, it represented a completely new way of thinking about toy production. Instead of carving each piece individually, manufacturers could now injection mold thousands of identical plastic parts in a single day. The economics of toy production flipped overnight. This is where the story gets really interesting because the rise of plastic toys coincided with two other massive cultural shifts that would define the modern toy industry. First was the baby boom. Between 1946 and 1964, American families had more children than any generation in history. Suddenly, there were millions of new customers for toys, and their parents had unprecedented disposable income thanks to post-war economic growth. The demand was there. Manufacturers just needed to figure out how to meet it. Second was television. In 1946, only 8,000 American households owned a TV set. By 1960, more than 45 million did. For the first time in history, toy companies could speak directly to children, bypassing parents entirely. Saturday morning cartoons became 30-minute toy commercials. Breakfast cereals came with toy prizes. The phrase, "collect them all," entered the American vocabulary. But television did more than just advertise toys, it created them. Shows like The Mickey Mouse Club and Howdy Doody spawned entire product lines. Characters that existed only on screen became physical toys that children could own, play with, and collect. The boundary between entertainment and commerce dissolved. This is when toys truly became an industry in the modern sense. Companies like Mattel and Hasbro emerged as major corporations, not just toy makers. They developed research and development departments, marketing teams, international distribution networks. They began thinking about toy lines rather than individual toys, creating ecosystems of related products that could generate revenue for years. The transformation was staggering. In 1950, the American toy industry was worth roughly $200 million. By 1970, it had grown to over $2 billion. By 2000, it topped $20 billion. Today, it's a $28 billion industry in the United States alone. But perhaps the most profound change was philosophical. Toys were no longer tools for education or preparation for adult life. They became entertainment products, designed to capture attention and generate desire. The educational philosophy that had dominated toy design for centuries gave way to what we might call the entertainment philosophy. Toys didn't need to teach children how to be adults, they just needed to be fun. This shift reflected a broader reimagining of childhood itself. In earlier eras, childhood was seen as preparation for adulthood, a brief period of training before taking on adult responsibilities. But the post-war era invented the modern concept of childhood as a distinct life stage with its own culture, its own consumer preferences, its own market segment. The toy industry both reflected and accelerated this change. By creating products specifically for children, marketed directly to children, designed around children's immediate desires rather than their long-term development, toy companies helped establish childhood as a separate economic category. Children weren't just future adults, they were current consumers. Today, as we watch the toy industry grapple with digital disruption, sustainability concerns, and changing play patterns, it's worth remembering how recent this entire enterprise really is. The idea that children deserve their own consumer products, their own entertainment industry, their own billion-dollar market, that's less than 80 years old. What began with a plastic potato became a fundamental shift in how we understand childhood, play, and commerce. The toy industry didn't just give us new products, it gave us new ideas about what children are for and what they deserve. Whether that's progress or tragedy depends, I suppose, on whether you think childhood should be a market or something more mysterious, something that can't be manufactured, packaged, or sold, but only lived.